And I'm on.
Hey, what's
Woo.
going on, everybody? Welcome to Poetically Christian Gamer. Appreciate you guys clicking on the video or jumping in the chat here on Twitch. We're getting ready to do another episode of Disciples Above Disability. If you guys are new here, my name is Derek, and I am a legally blind gamer and preacher. And I'm joined tonight, as always, by my good friend Paul, and I'll let Paul introduce himself.
Yep, and I'm Paul, and I am a neurodiverse gamer and Christian.
There you go. And together, guys, we are the disciples above disability. And our topic tonight, guys, is difficulties. Difficulties that we kind of face in life, difficulties we face in our spiritual life, and then just kind of what we would declare are some of the most difficult video games that we've ever played across a multi of generations. So, starting off, we're going to start with our Bible verses we always do, guys, talking about difficulties. Our Savior, Jesus Christ, prepared us for such a thing in our life. He says in John chapter 16 and verse 33, I tell you these things that you may have peace, because in the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Yes, simply put, we should draw inspiration, comfort, solace from reading that Bible verse every single time that we do, because it reminds us that Christ was preparing us for life, preparing us for the tough times that we were going to come across, that we were going to face in this life. He says, you turn to me, you turn to my will, you'll find that comfort, you'll find that peace that you desire, because I guarantee you, you are going to have tough times in this life, but be of good cheer. I've overcome things, and so can you. That's a really comforting set of scripture there. And it reminds us that we can overcome whatever we face. Myself being legally blind, and Paul with the challenges he faces, and of course, all of you guys lurking and watching, we all have difficulties that we face. And for all of us, it might not be the same. It's for some it might be physical, like me and Paul. For some it might be emotional. For some it might be financial, spiritual. But rest assured, you are going to have tribulation in this world, but you can overcome that difficulty thanks to Jesus Christ. It's pretty awesome, huh, Paul?
And I say amen to that, brother. And
Yeah, it's
just
pretty awesome.
just add that we grow in Christ's image by our tribulations.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. Our strength is made perfect in weakness, and the trial of our faith is more precious than gold.
Yep.
So, kind of leaning into that, uh, we'll start with the difficulties that myself being legally blind and you being autistic and things. What is a kind of a daily difficulty, or what is the most difficult thing you kind of face with the physical challenges you've been presented in life?
I would have to say that it's kind of a mixed bag, if
Welcome,
you
gift
will.
to subnet. Welcome to the chat room.
You know,
Yeah.
Tap to
because
show user actions.
of the, as you said, and because I just want to say real quick, I added the neurodiverse because it makes it, shorter.
Yeah,
But
that's all right.
uh, but no, I just wanted to say that because of the autism and the ADHD, you know, those two things usually kind of happen in just about, you know, everyday things,
Yeah.
and then the dyslexia, tends to happen, when it comes to, you know, reading and understanding things.
Right.
And but I would say that the thing that I deal with the most, if it's not, and I don't really know which one it comes from because, it's always hard for me to know where the ADHD ends and where the autism begins in some things. Um,
Yeah.
but
And
I
so
would
do you
say,
find that hard to focus like?
yeah, I do because, what I was going to say is one of the things that, a lot of people may not understand, and I hope I can enlighten people on this who are listening, or even those who have ADHD, might not know a lot about, what they're going through, and it's that, if you got impulsive things, an impulsive issue, you know, and it's not just that, we get distracted easily, like, oh, I want to go do this, or I want to go do this, or I'm going to go buy this, you know, because, that's the impulsive side. It's also our emotions,
Right.
you know. That's something that I've learned, in the last almost 3 years is, I'm not just impulsive when I want to make a choice. I'm also impulsive when I react to something too,
Yeah.
and that's very difficult for me because, I'm always impulsively reacting to something, mainly lately what my neighbor's doing.
Yeah.
And, because, you know, I won't, air too much because I don't want to be that kind of person, but I'll just say that my neighbor, has tested me in the sense of disturbances for a while. And it was easier to deal with when my mom was alive. But now that I'm doing it by myself, it's so much harder.
Yeah.
And so I end up just blowing up, and because it's like it's something else. It's something else. And I always blow up, and then I find myself having to apologize, asking God to forgive my impulsive side and not being more patient because, I don't want to do that. I want to be more patient, you
Right.
know, gr- grow in the fruit of the spirit, but I just
Oh,
can't seem to do that right now, and it's just so hard. So it's, yeah, that's a
yeah.
challenge for me.
Yeah. Patience is definitely. I mean, that's something for
Yes.
all of us. It takes a lifetime, to get there. That's something you're born with.
Mm.
That's a lifetime of trying to get better and improve. And
Oh, I
yeah,
know.
I could definitely see how your physical challenge would make that even more difficult.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and and whether it's the ADHD, because I found out, not too long ago that people with ADHD can also hyper focus. It's not just we have less attentive, we can also have too much attentive. I didn't know that.
Right.
I didn't know that the
Huh.
pendulum can swing both ways with ADHD. So it's like, okay, so I have autism, which I know is known for having hyper focus, moments. And I got the ADHD, which can give me hyper focus. So I'm like a hyper focus sometimes. So, there are those difficulties too, where my brain will just obsess over something, good or bad, that sometimes it's just
Yeah.
hard to get it out. It's kind of like getting a splinter. Or if anybody from California is watching, it's like getting a foxtail stuck in your sock. And they'll know what that means.
Yeah. Um, for me, I with being legally blind, when I was a kid, my vision wasn't as bad as it is now, and so
Yeah.
mine is kind of been a slow burn. It's been like slowly, piece by piece, things being taken from you that you used to be able to do. And then it kind of finally leveled off. I have a disease called Stargardt's,
Oh,
and it's a macular degeneration of your central vision. And when you start out as a young, if you're diagnosed with it like I was from a childhood, it starts out as not too bad, but as you get further along, it just progressively gets worse
yeah.
until you level off by the time you become an adult. And so you just kind of lose piece by piece. And the difficulty for me is just the little things, like going to a restaurant and not being able to read the menu. I mean,
Yeah.
just the little
Yeah.
things that people take for granted. Uh, Not being able to drive a car, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you drop something on the floor, it taking a while for me myself to figure out where it went or what it was. Um, and sometimes you question things, like why do I have to have this? Like life would be so much easier if I didn't have this. And
Oh, yeah.
I've almost found myself at times in life being like Paul. Paul went to the Lord 3 times that this thorn in the flesh would be removed from him, and he didn't understand why he had it. He sought the Lord 3 times that it would be taken away. And Jesus answered him by saying, "My grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness." And
Mm.
so then Paul went on to say, "Then most gladly will I glory in my infirmity, that the power of Christ may rest upon me." He realized that his difficulty and the things that he faced was not a curse, but rather a blessing. It was something the Lord made sure that he was going to use to be an example to others. And that's what I tell myself. There's a purpose for everything. A
Mm.
lot of times in life, we don't see the purpose for pain or the
Nope.
purpose for difficulty, but there is a purpose. The Lord is using you in a way that to relate to others that other people could never do.
Yeah.
For example, with you going through autism, you can relate to other autistic people or other people with ADHD in a way that I never could
Right.
and never could understand. And the same with me, going with the legal blindness. I can understand blindness or legally blind or
Hmm.
visual problems like that because you live it.
Yeah.
And
And if I may add, us being
sure,
bros, friends, we can learn from each other
right,
because
right.
something that I learned about having autism and people who don't is, and this is something I don't remember how I pieced this together now, to be honest, part of the ADHD. Um, but I remember at one point piecing together that God will bring certain people together to help each other learn from their difficulties, whether it's to learn more about the other person's difficulty, to be more understanding, or vice versa. And I think that by having people in my life, they learn about what it's like for me, and it teaches them as well as me learning, like with your legally blindness, that teaches me about stuff because, you know, like I told you before, my mom, she was kind of like you,
Yeah,
she was labeled legally blind because of her stroke, and because I lived with that for 5 years, I can understand what you go through based on my mom's experiences.
right.
I,
Yeah.
try, so it's like I can understand that because if we had met and my mom had never gone that, it'd be so new to me because I wouldn't know, should I say that to him, kind of thing,
Oh
so,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I agree with that. I think the Lord puts us where we need to be, guides our path, and puts people in our
yeah,
life and around us to where we can either develop our empathy and sympathy to be a better Christian, or puts us in a position to where we can be an example. So many times in life, people are watching your life.
yes,
They may know what you're facing, what you're going through, and they watch to see how you handle it, whether you handle it with grace and the things like that. And based on how you handle it and you hold yourself, they are inspired by you. They,
hmm,
look at you as an example, and you never even know that they're watching your life. And it's just a good example to us all to in life to be a good Christian, obviously, and what we do, but obviously hold yourself well. No matter what difficulty you face in life, handle it with grace.
mm,
Find the grace in the Lord. Find that He is sufficient. He is enough, and therefore, if He's enough, you are enough, and you can handle whatever you face. And by doing that, you inspire other lives in ways you never knew.
right,
And that's truly awesome.
it is, and they don't call us witnesses for no reason, right?
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
the Bible
so
tells us that
but we are
we
to
may have
witness.
we're to witness, and we may have entertained angels unaware. That
Hmm.
always got to me, like in life,
Oh, me
you have
too.
no idea who you're talking to.
No,
And
no.
yeah, it's pretty
So,
cool.
well, I want to pick your brain on something real quick.
Absolutely.
Because we were talking about difficulties and what the Lord gives you. And my mom used to always say this phrase that the Lord never gives you more than you can handle.
That's true.
And I wanted to ask what you think of that because I've been trying to, I want to say get some more vitamin G, if that's okay to say it that way. I've been trying to get more God out of my day in other ways,
Sure,
since I can't go to church right now. And so I've been, trying to find some good people on YouTube, some good,
sure.
preachers, who just talk about stuff. And well, there was this one guy I was watching for a while, and he was talking about how that phrase actually isn't true. And
The
yeah, the phrase God doesn't give you more than you can handle.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Yeah, I get you. You mean it's not biblical?
yeah, it's not biblical. And
Right, right. That's
so,
true. It is not biblical.
yeah, and so it made me think about what he was saying, and I thought, well, I thought it may not be biblical, but I still think there's truth in it.
God,
It,
well, we're told in God's word in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 that we face temptations in life, but the Lord will give us an escape that we may
yeah.
be able to bear it.
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily that he doesn't give you more than you can handle, but necessarily he gives you a way of relief from it,
Yeah.
a way that you can bear it, a way that you can come through it. Like a good example, we all, if you grew up around the church, you know the story of Daniel in the lion's den, right?
Hmm.
He ended up in there. He was a godly man, and most folks would say, well, why didn't God just stop Daniel from going to the lion's den in the first place? You see, God allowed Daniel, even though he was a godly man, a good man, a man doing what he was supposed to do, he allowed him to go into the den, but he guided him through it. And when he came out on the other side, he came out even stronger, and he inspired an entire kingdom to
Mm.
take God on in their life. See, there was a purpose for Daniel going through that.
Yeah.
And it's the same with you and me. A lot of times in life, we look and say, "Why God? Why Lord? Are you allowing me to go through this? Why must I face this?" And we don't realize that we are going through this because God has a purpose for it. He's going to guide us through. He's going to take care of you, and in the same time, He's going to use you as an example to inspire somebody else that you might not have ever known.
Yeah. Well, you see, that's kind of where I was going to go with my line of thinking was when I thought about it, I thought again, uh, it it that may not be biblical, but I still think that there's some truth to it because it may be in a different way, to find a different truth to it, you know,
Yeah.
and
Well,
and,
I
and
would kind of argue that it kind of is biblical, like I said,
yeah,
with that 1 Corinthians 10 telling us that he may gives you a way to escape that you may be able to bear it. So to me, I believe it is biblical, but
yeah, and that's a
he's
good,
arguing that that exact phrase isn't
yeah, the exact
biblical,
phrase, yeah,
and
and I
that is
agree with
true.
you,
That is
yeah,
not. Yeah,
yeah, and I agree with you with the phrase,
yeah.
and but I was thinking was that, I think, and this is just my opinion here, this is just Paul's opinion, but I think that there are things in our life that maybe we're not ready to handle, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I'm always going to use this example because it's the best example that I can use nowadays. And my example is now with my mom dying, right?
Okay. Right.
Because before it happened, see now, God could have called my mom home twice in the past, during her gallbladder rupture and when she had her heart attack. And he
Hmm.
didn't, you
Yeah.
know? And I think it's because when my mom, because the gallbladder came first. So I think that started God's, I'm going to say, molding of me to get me where he needed me to be. So my mom still needed to be around.
Yeah.
And then my mom had the heart attack. I was still in that process. It's like almost done yet. It's kind of like I'm in the oven. It's almost done yet. Because when they says, you're the sculptor and I'm the clay, mold me, Lord. I
Right.
think, at the very end of that, you got to be put in the oven. So,
Yeah.
um, so it's like not quite done yet, and So 5 years, I think in those 5 years, God was preparing me for 2022 because he knew I wasn't
Yeah.
ready yet. He knew I could handle it, but he knew that I couldn't handle it then.
He was preparing you to be on your
He was
own.
prepared, yes. And so I think that the phrase should be more like God doesn't give you anything he's not ready to prepare you for.
Well, the cool thing about that is the beginning of that verse actually says that there is no temptation that has taken you, but that which is common to man. So, in other words,
Yeah.
there's nothing in this life that you face that others have not already faced.
Yeah.
And through that, God will make a way for you to escape. Through the temptation, God will make a way for you to escape that you may be able to bear it. So there's going to be a way out of it, a way for you to get
Hmm.
through it, a way for you to be guided through it, taken care of.
Yeah.
That's a comforting thing. And, you know, as God likes, as the old expression goes, been there, done that. There's nothing in this world that you face that others haven't already faced and come
Yeah.
through with God, and He's going to do the same for you. And
Yeah. And
that's where that phrase I think comes from a lot. He doesn't give you anything you can't handle.
yeah. And even more comforting to know is that Jesus has already been through all the temptations that we will ever experience.
Absolutely, yeah.
So he knows what we're
Yeah,
going through. He sympathizes, and it's just like you just go to him and tell him, I'm
yeah.
feeling this now, so
Yep. Come unto me, all you that labor and heavy laden, I'll give you
yep.
rest. Yeah, yeah. Jesus has wept. He's been betrayed. He felt pain. He
Hmm.
felt sorrow.
Yep.
Everything.
Yeah.
And
And
so never feel like you're alone. Like the difficulty that you face is impossible because He knows. A lot of times we think of God as, oh, He's so far above. He's omnipotent.
hmm.
How could He understand what I'm going through as a human? My emotions. That's because He walked on this earth through His Son in the
Yep.
flesh and experienced everything you did. So
Yeah.
He knows. Believe me, He understands what you're going through.
Yeah. And something I like that Max pointed out that always I always think about is, a lot of people will a lot of the times focus on Jesus's divinity, but they always seem to forget that he was also human too.
Absolutely.
I mean, he got tired, he got hungry, he slept,
Right.
and I know a lot of people don't like to go too deep, but I like to say, when he itched, he scratched, and he had, I mean, he did all the human things. He basically got the human experience, and it was genuine,
Absolutely. And he understood,
so he
what it
knows.
was. And even himself, even when he's hanging on the cross, that he endured that for 6 hours.
Oh, I
A
know.
lot of folks don't know that, but he endured the cross for 6 hours. And at the end of it, he cried out in so much pain, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?
Hmm.
So even Christ cried out, why is this happening? Have you forgotten me, Lord?
Yeah,
And before he gave up the ghost. So Christ understands that
he
despair,
understands.
that
Yes,
difficulty that you go through, and that
yes,
exacerbation of why is this happening to me?
yep, and
It's awesome.
yeah,
You could
and
just
it
keep
is
peeling
awesome.
this back.
And that's why I want to add. That's why he's my king, and I'll follow him.
Absolutely.
He
And I
knows.
hope everybody that listens to this, if whatever difficulty you're facing, guys, you can
Yes.
overcome it. That's one of the things I like to say before I do any of my blind preacher plays. I say this is a series where a legally blind preacher, tries to conquer gains while we glorify God's name. And no matter what cross you personally face, you can overcome it with perseverance and God's grace. And I truly
Mm-hmm.
believe that's not just a tagline.
Nope. You're a poet, and you don't know it. So,
I'm a poet and do know
okay.
it. 3 books
So,
later, yeah. Um, so,
so
as
let's
far
move
as
on to
difficulties,
video
you
games, right?
guys, yeah, we're talking about video games. And the whole time we've been talking here, guys, you've been seeing Fighting Vipers, the arcade port. I'm going to put that specifically, the arcade port of this rolling in the background. And Paul and I agree that this is one of the most difficult games ever to
difficult.
exist. We're not talking the Sega Saturn home port of this.
Mm-mm.
We're talking the arcade. Uh, you want to give it a go? It's on the Microsoft Store. Well, at least it was. I don't know. Sega's been delisted some things. But I bought this a long time ago. But try it out. If you don't believe me, it'll put your fighting game prowess to the test. But
Yes.
with that, with the difficulties that we face, we've talked about the difficulties we can overcome through God's grace and our Savior. We're going to kind of talk about our little Mount Rushmore or our four list of what are the most difficult video games. If you guys have them, feel free to jump in the chat, put yours in the chat or in the comments on the YouTube video on Poetically Christian Gamer. Let us know what is the four most difficult video games you have ever played. And with that being said, my friend, what are your four most difficult video games ever?
Well, first off, I propose that we do like we did last time. We'll take turns.
All right, we can do that.
So I'm going to go ahead and pick something that we were talking about pre-show, and I'm going to go ahead and pick a boss fight for a particular video game because the video game itself wasn't, I mean, it was a challenge, but it didn't really get challenging until I got to that end boss fight. And anybody watching or lurking can, if they've played this game, might be able to sympathize with this. But I'm going to pick um, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth
Oh.
for number four because, I mean, there were difficulty spikes in the game. At least there were for me. There were some difficulty spikes in the game, you know, and then it kind of, at least in the beginning, and then it kind of, stayed a little even, and then I got to the very end. And spoilers, I'm sorry, but anybody who's played Final Fantasy VII and is playing Rebirth knows who the final boss is going to be anyway. But
Yeah.
I apologize in advance for spoilers. But you have to fight against Genova, but I forget what her name is in this one, but it's Genova something. And then you fight right at the end. You fight against Sephiroth. No breaks, no checkpoints, no saving, no nothing. It is a gauntlet. You fight against Genova
Uh,
in three forms. You fight against Sephiroth, I think, in three or four forms. And then you have to use Cloud and Aerith to fight against Sephiroth, just regular Sephiroth by himself, you know. And if you die, you start over again.
uh,
And I did. The first time I fought that final boss fight, I died. I got to the very end when you fight just Sephiroth, and he did a move that I wasn't expecting, and he got me and killed me in almost one hit. And I was so mad that I just pretty much just stopped playing the game for the rest of the day. I was so fuming because that
oh
was, oh,
man.
I know it was such a frustrating thing. It was like I got to do that all over. So the next day,
Oh.
though, fortunately, God blessed me. The next day, I was able to beat it. But at that point in time, it was the hardest thing I ever faced.
And
So yeah.
much to your surprise, you probably beat the first part of it, and you're like, "Oh yes, I did it! I did it!" You know.
Well, yeah.
Then
When
somebody,
when yeah when I uh, got to that very end part, it was like, okay, that wasn't too bad. I mean, it was kind of long, but it wasn't too bad. And then I
oh
beat it, and it
man.
was like, oh, and there's so many
And if you
parts
didn't
to
have
it.
enough resources, and oh my goodness.
Oh, I know, and I did. I had one good health potion
Uh,
to heal me completely, and all the other ones, help were healing me up in like chunks. So I
yeah.
had to spam. I had to spam the health potions and save the mega elixirs. So yeah, so
oh, that would be
so that's
so
that's my
brutal.
number four. That's why it's number four because it's technically a boss fight. So
Oh man, that would be brutal. I couldn't even
yeah,
imagine the despair of getting in the middle of a second boss battle and realizing you don't have anything.
yeah, and that's why I
uh,
respect you not liking role playing games, bro. So
no, no, I'm not an RPG guy. No, I played a few in my day, but nothing like that. The Final Fantasy X, Super Mario RPG. I'm pretty light on the RPG stuff.
yeah,
Um, All right, all right.
You're
If
number
I had to
four.
go, my number four, some of these are going to be classic games and a few will be modern. But for classic games, number four, this is a game I still have actually. I just always found this to be super difficult. I'm going with Maximum Carnage,
Hmm.
and it lives up to the name. I
Yes.
was never able to beat that game without using cheat codes.
Oh,
I would get about halfway, three quarters of the way through it, and just could not make it. That game to me was brutal. It still is brutal when I pick it up and play today on my Genesis. Yeah, I'm going Maximum Carnage.
yes. Especially when you fight against Carnage at the end.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it
he just
was
I
brutal.
mean, I know he spams that one move where he windmills his arms around and he's always knocking you
Yeah,
down and you're always having to get up and and you're like you're chipping away at his health and he's just chewing it away. So,
yeah, and that's one of those
oh, I
games
know.
that if you do not know where every secret is, every secret life, every secret heart, you are not going to get very far in that. It is brutal,
It is.
definitely brutal. Uh, so that would be my number
That's your
four.
four.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So, well, I think for my number three, I'm gonna choose a game I played on. I'm trying to think. Was it 360 Xbox? And that's a game I played called Otogi.
Oh, Togi, I never heard of it.
Really? Hmm.
Uh-uh.
Well, it anybody who's ever played the Souls games will know when I say
Welcome to the chat room.
that it
Double
was
tap
made
to show user
from
actions.
software.
Huh.
So, yeah, it was one of their, I guess you could call it Souls before it was Soul, Dark Souls.
There you go.
So, but yeah, it was just this game called Otogi. They made a sequel. I like the sequel a little bit more, even though it was still challenging. But the first game, uh, it was actually kind of fun. It's kind of a, hack and slash game, and I don't even remember what stage it is, but there's a stage I could never get past because you go into like this, because it's, heavily based on Japanese mythology. So
Yeah.
you go inside this temple, and about partway through the beginning part of the stage, this, I'm not sure what he is. He's some kind of demon-like thing that shows up, and if he catches up to you and touches you, he kills you in one hit. It's practically game over.
Oh man.
And for the life of me, this was back before we really had internet. So for
Right.
the life of me, I could never figure out how you were supposed to beat this level because I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. And he always caught up to me, and so I never got past that part of the game, and I just stopped playing it after a while because I didn't know what to do. But that's going to be my number three because that was hard. You know,
Oh.
I mean, it was already hard getting that far in the first place, and then they hit you with a one hit, it's game over. So
Yeah, it
you're,
sounds like that would be brutal.
oh
I
yeah,
never
so
played it, but your description is enough for me.
yeah,
All
and so but that's
right,
number
my
three.
number three. I'm gonna go with another oldie. I'm good.
But a
I had
goodie.
this for the Super Nintendo as a kid. I'm going with Super Ghouls and Ghosts. That game, I for whatever reason was brutal to me. I could never get past about the second or third stage, and if you even do somehow, I don't know how, people have, obviously. You can check them out on YouTube. I don't know how anybody could ever beat the game, but even if you were somehow able to manage to beat the game, you don't really beat the game, as you only get one part of the ending and you have to go through the entire game again to get the full ending.
Hmm.
So that game is brutal. It's got to be number three on my list.
I could not agree more.
Any Ghouls and Ghosts game is rough,
Any
but
ghouls and
Super
goes,
Ghouls and
yes,
Ghosts was just brutal. It's the next level of rough.
yes, that's a good choice. You kind of stole one from me too, so.
That's all
But
right.
that's cool. That's cool. That just shows the reputation the game has. If two
Oh
people
yeah,
agree.
yeah.
So my number two is I'm gonna pick a classic now, and I'm gonna pick Contra Hard Corps.
Oh, any Contra, yeah.
I mean, yeah, any Contra game was hard. Super Contra was hard too,
Yeah.
but for me, Contra Hard Corps was a lot harder,
Yeah.
than Super Contra. Mainly one, it's because with Contra Hardcore, you know, it just seemed like there was more going on,
Yeah.
than with Super Contra, you know. But yeah, but I mean, that game was so hard for me, you know, that the only way I could actually enjoy that game was if I used my Game Genie. So I cheated. That was the only way I could do it. I've tried playing it recently when they released the Contra collection, and I
Yeah.
tried playing it and I couldn't get very far. I mean, I got a lot further than I probably would have, you know, but I still had a hard time, really getting through that game. I mean, I beat the first stage and all. It was like, hey, I beat the first stage, woohoo, but your luck only goes so far. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
but yeah, Contra for me, at least that one. And real quick, I picked that one because that's actually my favorite. So
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
the
that's
Contra
yeah.
games,
Usually when you make these lists, it's personal to you, and
yes.
and speaking of that, my number two, uh, this is personal to me. That's why I kind of picked Maximum Carnage. I've always, since the time I was a kid, I've always been good at fighting games or beat 'em ups. Yeah, that was my jam. That's
Yeah.
always what I've liked. It's always what I've been good at. So when I wasn't able to play one very well or beat one, to me it was baffling because I was able to play all the others. And so that's why Maximum Carnage made the list. Super Ghouls and Ghosts was just rough because it's rough.
Hmm.
Um, my number two, I'm going to go with Streets of Rage 3.
Oh,
To me, Streets of Rage 1 was easy. I beat it a ton of times. Streets of Rage 2, beat it even more times. But for some reason, Streets of Rage 3 is brutal. That game, and you cannot beat it on easy. You have to beat it on at least normal or harder difficulty to play through the entire game. If you try beating it on easy, you only get to stage 5 and you get a bogus ending. You don't get a real ending. So, and when you crank the difficulty up to normal, that game is going to let you know it. The enemies
yeah.
are going to surround you, and the bosses are about as cheap as it gets. Yeah, Streets of Rage 3. It just, like I said, after beating the first two so easily for me, the third one was rough to get through, and it is still to this day when you pick it up and play it, it's brutal. So Streets of Rage
Yes.
3 is number two on my list.
Oh, that's I didn't see I haven't really played through all of Streets of Rage 3. I've only gone as far as 2. So
Yeah, through
I was
who
not aware
three.
how brutal that game was.
Oh, yeah, give it a whirl. You'll
I
see
might
what I
have to
mean.
because I have it on my Xbox. I might have to.
Yeah, brutal.
So all right then. My number one is I'm going to copy from your list and choose Super Ghouls and Ghosts
Yeah, definitely.
because I mean, I could pick the one for the Genesis, or I could pick, the original because I tried playing the arcade one time.
Yeah, any of
But
them are hard.
yeah, any of them are hard. But
Yeah,
Super Ghouls and Ghosts again, it's one of my favorites growing up playing. But it was also one of the hardest games I ever played. And for me, what made it so more difficult was I couldn't even cheat with that game
yeah,
because the Game Genie didn't really come with any good codes for me to really make it more accessible.
right.
So,
And as far
I
as
could
I
go.
know, there's no Konami code either.
No, there's no Konami code. So,
Yeah,
I could only go as far as stage 2 with that game. And then I'd get to the boss of stage 2. If I got to the boss of stage 2, I might have to add, because the second
yeah,
segment of the second stage could get challenging depending on whether I was having a good day or a bad day. So
yeah,
if I got to the boss of stage 2, he'd always, I'd always get beaten anyway.
yeah.
So
Even though it was a Capcom game, there was no Konami code. There was no cheats or anything.
no, so and it was only until recently when they, started releasing it as an emulated game on, I'm trying to think, well, we got it on the Capcom Stadium
Yeah,
collection that I was able to, you know, actually beat the game the first time because they give you a save state and you can rewind. I think that the one you can rewind might
Yeah,
be.
yeah,
No, 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 no. You get invincible. Duh.
yeah.
So you just don't die. So that's what makes it.
There you go.
So yeah, that's what made it easy for me to play is Capcom said, "Oh, we'll make this a little bit easier for you." So it's like, I'll
Oh
take it.
my.
So
Yeah, yeah. Actually get to see
so
what the game looks like.
I know it felt I was in uncharted territory after stage 2. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So, but hey, I couldn't die, so I didn't care.
And
But yeah, that's my number one.
my number one is what we got rolling in the background. Again, like I said, these
Mhm.
lists are personal to me. Fighting games, I've never been able to come across a fighting game that I could not beat. Fighting Vipers arcade, I specify arcade, is to me the most brutal fighting game ever to try to beat. And I mean, this is on a list with Virtua Fighter 2 Arcade, which in itself is brutal, but you guys have seen me on the channel on YouTube beat this several times. I even got a Virtua Fighter playlist. So I was able to conquer that, and it's brutal too, and it will challenge you. But Fighting Vipers is next level. It is harder than Virtua Fighter 2. It's harder than Dead or Alive 4 for the 360. This to me is the king of hardest fighting game, right? It's up there with Turtles Tournament Fighters for the Genesis. I mean, it is
Oh,
up
oh,
there. It is brutal. So I would have to go with Fighting Vipers because this game has always been rough for me.
yeah, that's a good pick, and the Turtles reference that was a good one too, because that's a hard fighting game.
Yeah. The Super Nintendo is not as bad, but the
Nope.
Genesis version of Tournament Fighters, I challenge anyone to play that game.
Oh, I know. I mean, the computer practically reads your mind in that game.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's beyond any button reading. It's next level.
Yeah. So wow.
Yeah.
So that was
So
a good
that was
list.
yeah. We could have went with the lower hanging fruit guys. Obviously, we could have went with the Dark Souls games or
Oh, right.
things like that. But we went with the list that was personal to us. And to me, I don't find modern games nearly as difficult as retro games.
No.
Uh, I think it was just a different era. There was no
Yeah.
hand holding. There was no explanation tutorials. It was here, kids, sink or swim.
Yeah. And you notice what I did, bro, is I picked one from each console.
There you go. I noticed that.
Yep.
That was cool. Well, guys, we talked about the difficulties that Paul and I face in life and the difficulties we all face in life and how we have a purpose for pain and there is a purpose for our life to be an inspiration to others, how we handle it with grace. And overall, and the most important thing is you can overcome it. There is a reason for you to go through. God doesn't always necessarily pull us out of the things that we have to go
Mm.
through in life, but He does see us through it. Jesus Christ told us in John chapter 16 and verse 33 that I tell you these things that you may have peace, because in the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. Yes, guys, He gives us His word, He gives us His guidance, He gives us His love to give us peace, because He guarantees we will have trials, tribulations in this life. But hold to this, be of good cheer, and take solace in these words. He's overcome it, and we can too. No matter what difficulties you face in life, guys, He will see you through. I thank you so much for joining me. Any final thoughts, Paul?
I can't think of anything. Just
All right.
hope everybody
Thank you,
has a good
guys.
day.
Yes, absolutely. Blessed wishes to you all, guys. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. As always, remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel on Poetically Christian Gamer. Hit that bell icon, and that'll notify you the next time we make any of our videos. Christian gaming reviews, accessibility reviews, let's plays, retro or modern games, Bible sermons, and the Disciples Above Disability series, and so much more, guys. And if you're watching over on Twitch, feel free anytime we're doing these conversations, jump in the chat, be part of the Disciples Above Disability conversation, guys, or anytime we do a Let's Play, any of the things that we do, we'd love to have you. It's free, and by following, you get a notification when I'm live, and you can see when I'm live and be able to jump in. So, all right, guys, with that being said, I love you. God loves you. We both love you. Thanks for
Yep.
joining us, and until the next one, bless wishes.